Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm currently reporting from East Los Angeles. There's a beautiful view of downtown and the sunset behind me, which hopefully by now you've seen through a drone flight. We're not here to talk about city views, but instead to talk about some LA poker. There's a lot of action in LA when you gamble here, you know? A lot of people with money, a lot of people with the willingness to go for it and put you in tough spots at the poker table. And that's what happened to me last Friday night at Hustler Casino Live. I played a huge game. It was 200-400 with the 800 straddle often on the table. For me personally, that is a huge game. A lot of money to be either lost or won. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into that session. I had a big result, and I think you guys are gonna enjoy these hands. Leave a like or a comment or something to show appreciation if you like the video. I know Joey's been working very hard on editing these, and we have no plans of stopping anytime soon. So as always, thanks for watching. Let's get into some poker. Guys, welcome back. We are once again at Hustler, and today is no normal day. Game is 200-400, like I said, with the 800 straddle often on. And in this first interesting hand, that will be the case. However, the straddle is on from the cutoff, which is a bit weird. It's normally the first player after the blinds. But in this case, Dennis has put on the straddle from late position. Button folds, and now Max raises it up from the small blind to 3,000. I'm in the under the gun position, yet to act. Kind of odd, but just bear with me here. And I look down at ace jack. Offsuit, not super strong, but I think strong enough to definitely play. I don't want to call and get squeezed from behind or have a bunch of other players enter the pot behind me. So I decide to re-raise. I make it $9,000. Max makes the call when it gets back around to him. So we go heads up to a flop of king 7-3. Note how big the pot is already. It's nearly $20,000 after a simple raise and re-raise pre-flop. And that's kind of a testament to how big tonight's game is gonna be. Anyway, he checks it over to me, and I put in a small bet of $7,000. Max lets it go, and that ends the hand, but already we are up over $10,000, as you can see, just from a simple pot like this. It's gonna be a stressful evening of poker. Time to hang on. The very next hand, Peter limps in for 400. Dennis makes it 3,000 from the hijack, and I look down at ace king in the big blind. Real hand this time, or at least a lot more real than ace jack. Ace jack is still pretty good, but anyway, I make it 15,000 this time. This one is for sure qualified to re-raise. Peter gets out of the way, gets back around to Dennis, who makes the call with his ace-8 offsuit. Not exactly the best hand to call with, but perhaps he's got plans post-flop. Unfortunately for him, I hit top pair on king jack deuce with 2 hearts. Pretty straightforward c-bet here. I make it 12,000. And once again, we get a fold right on the flop. But here we make $15,000. So already up 25K in the first couple of minutes of the stream. And yeah, that kind of just shows you right there. You can win a lot of money or you can lose a lot of money when the stakes are this high. Let's hope we continue to run good. This next pot is nothing like the other two. A lot of action in this one. Oh, I forgot to mention, the progressive stand-up game was also on, which is like the stand-up game, except it's even more brutal because multiple players can lose and you can win multiple bounties. It's a bit complicated, but all you need to know is that if you lose the stand-up game, it costs you $9,000. Also, it never stops. So the second one stand-up game ends, the next one immediately begins. It's just continuous for the entire night. Some of the players wanted to play this. I definitely don't mind. Not everyone was happy about it because it really changes things, but needless to say, it affects the action even more so than if we were playing regular Hold'em. So anyway, that might be the reason for some of these wide holdings. In this one, Peter opens it up to $3,000 from middle position. Dennis calls, Brittany calls, Max calls, Ryan calls, and I look down at pocket tens in the straddle. Rates to be the best hand more often than not. Only player I'm really worried about is Peter. If he's got a bigger pair than me, or maybe 2 overs, it could get a little dicey, but definitely not going to just call with a hand like this, especially with all this dead money behind. So I make it $20,000 to go. Back around to Peter now, and he decides that's not enough and bumps it up to 55,000. That is around half of my stack. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty afraid when I saw this because on one hand, you know, it's Peter. We all know he likes to give action. He's down to gamble, etc. On the other hand, he is making it $55,000 after I make it 20K. So it looks like I've got something pretty good. He doesn't seem interested in that and still raises. Perhaps we're in trouble here, but as you guys will see from the action, well, I don't have much choice because now Dennis, after calling the 3,000, decides the hell with it. He's all in for 58.8, so just a little over the 55K. Brittany folds, but now Max decides that he's in there with Ace Jack and essentially cold calls out of the small blind with me left to act behind. He puts in the additional money. Nearly 60K out of his stack is now in the pot. Back around to me now, and well, no choice at all now. If there ever was one, originally heads up versus Peter. Now with the Max's money and Dennis's money in the pot, I've got no choice but to go with it and just hope that 10s are the best hand. This is what gambling's all about, getting it in good and hoping to win. So that's what I do. I jam all in for 117K. Interesting developments now as Peter, who only has to call 62K into a pot that's now around 300, decides to fold. I mean, I know he's got 10-7 off and it's probably not that bad of a fold, but when you're getting such a good price, I feel like you might as well just gamble at this point, right? But I'm more than happy to see it. He puts in 55,000 pre-flop and then folds. Back around to Max now. He's got to call another 60K and he nearly folds as well, which would have been the absolute dream to just have over $100,000 dead, literally dead because both players folded, and then go to a board heads up with Dennis, but that doesn't end up happening. Max does make the call eventually after thinking it over for a bit. So yeah, we've got a huge pot here. Over $350,000 in the middle. I think this might be the biggest pot I've played so far this year. I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely up there. And yeah, there's a side pot between me and Max. I'm not entirely sure what the amounts are. I think it's around 150 between me and Max, and then the remainder is the three-way all-in between Max, Dennis, and myself. So anyway, we're off to see two boards. We decided to run it twice. On the first board, there's a jack right in the window, which kind of breaks my heart, but then a 10 sneaks up right behind it, so we flop middle set, looking to avoid disaster with a king or any other sketchy straight looking cards. No such luck for these players. We hold on the first board. Set of 10s is good, so we are guaranteed at least half this pot, which is already quite profitable. The second run out would be pretty awesome if we could hold here too, but Max flops top 2 with ace jack, turns trips, and then rivers quads. Yeah, pretty damn sweet for him. So he makes 4 of a kind. We hit a set on the first board. We end up chopping this one, and when it's all said and done, I win 60K and Max wins 60K, if my math is not mistaken. So yeah, a lot of drama, a very intense hand with 4 players putting a bunch of money in the pot. Luckily it works out for us this time, and so far we are having a very good night. Now up to this point, I think I've got a good image. I've only played good hands. Everything I've shown down has been solid, which is why I'm going to try to sneak into this pot and win it with 8-3 offsuit. Everyone is talking, no one seems interested, and I'm desperate to win a button because I am at danger of losing the stand-up game, which is going to cost me $9,000. So when Max limps in for 400, I pretend I've got something good on the button, even though it's just the octa crab. I make it $2,000. Unfortunately, get called by both of the blinds. That's Brandon Stevens, by the way, in the small blind. Peter's in there, and then Max calls as well. So probably done with it, but then the board is perfect. I can't help myself. It's ace king 5 rainbow. I mean, if I'm not going to represent this board, then what board am I going to represent? Unless, of course, I actually hit with 8-3. But anyway, it gets to me after they all check. I put in $2,000. Brandon and Peter do get out of the way, but Max comes along with his pocket 3s, so heads up going to a turn, which doesn't look too dangerous to me, shouldn't really change much. So when Max checks to me, I decide to continue applying pressure. I bet once again, this time $6,000, and that is enough to get the job done as Max finally folds his pocket 3s, which I can't really blame him for on this kind of board. Just like that, we get it done. Show the 8-3, collect a button, and avoid disaster in losing 9K. not mad about winning 8K in the pot either. In this next one, Brittany opens up the action to $2,000. Max makes the call, and I've got a suited ace on the button. Ace 6 of diamonds. Not really sure if calling is a great play here. We could easily get squeezed from the blinds, and it also immediately caps our hand to something not that good. Folding is probably okay once in a while. I know that seems a bit nitty. Re-raising once in a while, I think also good. That's what I opt for here. With Max having called behind, I think we're a little incentivized to try to capitalize on that dead money, so I make it 7,000 to go. Brittany makes the call when it gets back around to her, as does Max. So we're gonna go 3 ways to a flop of Queen 7-5 with 2 diamonds. That means we've got the nut flush draw as well as the overcard. Oftentimes an ace would give us the best hand as well on the turn or river. So I'm pretty happy, of course, with this board until Brittany decides to lead all in for $40,000. Max gets out of the way, and well, as you guys can see, it's a dream spot for me as she's got a smaller flush draw. But of course, I don't know that in the moment. From my experience with Brittany, usually this indicates top pair, maybe even middle pair that, you know, just says the hell with it, I'm going in. So yeah, I'm not in love with just having a flush draw versus this size. We have to call 40,000 into a pot that was, you know, like 20 going to the flop. Not really getting great odds to chase a draw for that price. It's a lot of money, you know, 40K. But then at the same time, you know, the ace might be good. And what if she does have a smaller flush draw, like let's say Jack 10 of diamonds, or maybe 8-6 suited for a flopped open ender. I don't know, all these sorts of hands that she might just say, screw it, why not? So after weighing my options, despite not loving this situation, I make the call. Whatever, even if she does have a pair, we've got diamonds, we've got the ace, how bad can it really be? I make the call. I'm very happy to hear that she also has a flush draw, so we just need to avoid her making a pair. On the first board, we turn the nuts, so that's probably going to be me. On the second board, no help on the turn, but nothing changes on the river. It's a 10 of clubs, and that means that ace high is going to beat king high. So just like that, out of nowhere, we win an over $100,000 pot with this flopped flush draw, and yeah, it worked out. Running hot tonight, hoping to keep that going. Immediately the next hand, Ryan opens up the action to $2,000. Ryan Feldman, by the way, creator of Hustler Casino Live, he's in this game. I'm next to act with Queen Jack suited, a very nice hand, and a good candidate, I think, to re-raise with. Try to get heads up with Ryan, and also balance out the times I've got aces, kings, queens, and all the other good stuff. So I make it 6,000 to go. Back around to Brittany in the straddle. She just rebought for $50,000. She cold calls this 6K raise. Ryan makes the call as well, so we go 3 ways to a flop of 10-7-3 with 1 heart. Interesting board. We've got 2 overs, backdoor straight, backdoor flush, but we are also up against 2 players who don't love to fold and are prone to aggressive actions such as the dreaded check raise from time to time. So I think taking a free card when it checks to me is okay. Betting seems totally fine as well, since this board isn't too dangerous, but I decided to just check it back and see what happens. Turn card is the 3 of hearts, giving me a flush draw. Brittany checks again, Ryan checks again, and I think at this point I make a little bit of a mistake and check back once again. I just thought it's very possible that Ryan was checking a pocket pair, maybe even a 10, a 7, and he would have no plans of folding if I were to start betting. Could also be getting trapped by Brittany once in a while. I know she likes to get sneaky with strong hands, but I think betting here is also totally fine. It just kind of sucks when you bet a good hand like a flush draw and then you have to fold to a big check raise. I'd rather bet with like really weak hands or really strong hands. This one is just right in the middle where, you know, I don't want to have to fold. So I think betting would have been better, but I decide to check it back. And we see the king of diamonds on the river. No help to me, aside from the fact that I could easily have a king after playing the hand the way I did pre-flop. Brittany checks again, Ryan checks again now. And well, there's 20K in the middle, and if I'm not taking a stab on this run out, I think that's just a little bit too weak. We've got queen high, which will almost never be the winning hand, and it seems that none of the other players in this pot are too strong. So if they've checked a king, hope that I bluff it. Congratulations, they are going to get their wish. I bet $8,000 when it gets to me. Brittany snap folds her ace high, as does Ryan. So despite not absolutely loving the way I played this one on the turn, we get it done on the river and steal this one away. A few rounds later, this hand goes down where Max limps in from the small blind for $600. It looks like the 800 is on once again in this one. Ryan then makes it 4,000 from the big blind, and I am next to act with ace 10 suited. Similar situation as a few of the hands tonight. Strong enough to re-raise. We're happy to have position. We want to be heads up. Very playable holding, so I make it $14,000. Back around to Max, who calls the $14,000 after having limped in, which I do not love because I feel like that might incentivize Ryan to try to bluff me out and then capitalize on Max's money in there. But he does not. Ryan just calls, so we do go to a flop three ways, which looks pretty good to me. It's king, jack, 8 with 1 club. So we've got a gut shot to the nuts if a queen were to come. We've got the overcard and of course backdoor clubs. Not just that, but this is a board that I would often connect with quite heavily after having re-raised pre-flop to $14,000. At least I would hope so. So when the action checks to me, I decide to bet small, 12,000. This is what I would do with ace king, pocket aces, flopped sets, king jack, whatever. You guys get the idea. Max thinks for a bit, actually quite a long time, and eventually folds, and I think that kind of shows us he's likely got a jack or maybe an 8, something, because it took him quite a while to let go of this one. Now Ryan makes the call, and we see the 7 of spades on the turn. Ryan checks again, and this is one of those spots where I kind of just chickened out and decided to check it back, which I don't think is the worst thing ever. But if the game had been smaller, let's say we were playing 50-100, for example, or even 100-200, and I wasn't on like this big downswing recently, I might have gone for a big bluff here, because what I think is the best course of action is to bet around the size of the pot, like $65,000. Like I said, I could have a bunch of strong stuff, and that's what I would bet with all those strong holdings. Maybe we could check back ace queen, since that's the nut no pair, if you will, but ace 10 probably just a little bit too weak. And yeah, I think Ryan could easily have called a flop with a hand that now has to fold the turn against a big bet. Of course, if he has like king queen or maybe king 10 suited, he's definitely not going anywhere just yet, so perhaps we saved some money. But yeah, I don't know. I feel a little bit embarrassed that I didn't go for this big bluff, because I felt like I would have to bet 65,000 and then rip it all in on the river. And do I really want to risk this entire night on a hand like this? I don't know. I decided to check it back, and then we hit a 10 on the river, which I guess is okay. If he called the flop with like 9-8 suited or whatever, we now win. But when Ryan checks, I think it's obvious that he's got a hand better than a 10. I check it back hoping that somehow we win. Maybe he's got like queen 10 suited, but nah, he's got queen jack suited, and we lose versus a jack. Not the worst hand ever. I'm not super mad about the way I played it, but I just know that I would have the courage to put in a huge bluff under other circumstances. So yeah, this is kind of the trade-off with playing huge games. Like you could win a lot of money, but you also don't always have the guts to go for plays that require a lot of confidence and a lot of comfortability with the stakes, which I did not have tonight. So I'll stop rambling about that and move on to the next hand, where I've got king 10. Brittany opens up the action at 2,000. I am in the small blind, and well, it's a pretty bad hand, should probably fold most of the time, but I have a good image, like I said, and we do need to win a pot once again for the stand-up game. So I make it $8,000 to go. Brittany makes the call, and we flop pretty good. It's jack 10-9 with 2 diamonds. So we've got middle pair, we've got the straight draw, the backdoor diamonds, the overcard. I guess a king wouldn't be the best card ever. But anyway, pretty good flop. I decided to check it though, since we've just got middle pair, and Brittany checks it back. Turn card immediately bails us out of any possible concern. It's the queen of spades giving me a straight. I now bet $4,000. Brittany makes the call with her straight draw and bottom pair. River is beautiful. It's the 4 of clubs. Shouldn't change anything at all. Only losing to ace king at this point, which is incredibly unlikely. I of course just bet again. It's not rocket science. I've got a straight, so what else am I going to do? Put in $10,000, but Brittany folds right away. I show her the king, let her know she makes a good fold, and yeah, we take this one down as well. A few rounds later, we encounter this pot, which was quite significant to my night, and I'll explain a little more about that right after the pot. So here we go. I've got ace queen. I make it $2,000. Get called by Brandon Stevens, Peter, Dennis. So 4 of us are going to a flop, and all 3 of these guys are no stranger to gambling, so could definitely get out of hand quick being out of position. That's the reason why I decide to check it when it comes ace 6-4. We've got a really strong hand, top pair, second kicker. But for one, it's a good strategy to occasionally check top pair out of position because, you know, you don't want to play face up every time. And also just the players that I'm against in this hand, I think, are prone to firing, which is immediately highlighted by the fact that Brandon bets 5,000 after I check, and he's got Jack 9 offsuit. So credit to him. He's going to try to steal this one. Unfortunately for him, Peter calls right behind him. He's got an ace. Dennis calls as well with bottom pair. And of course, I am going nowhere just yet. Could even put in a fancy check raise here from time to time, but being super deep with essentially every player in this hand, I'm not in love with bloating the pot out of position with a single pair. So I decided to just call, and we see the 3 of clubs on the turn. 7-5 does get there. That's the most obvious straight draw, as well as some potential 2 pairs, like let's say 6-3 suited or ace 3. But aside from that, it's not too concerning. I check it again. Brandon now checks. Peter checks as well. Dennis does not check. As you guys can see, he has turned himself 2 pair with the old 4-3 suited. Just a standard hand here in Los Angeles, California. He bets 15,000. I once again am going nowhere just yet, although I'm not in love with this. You know, I feel like many times he would just check back an ace given the flop action. So I feel like he's either bluffing or he's got me beat. But again, I call. My hand is slightly under repped still, so I toss in the 15K. Brandon gets out of the way. Peter, also with an ace, makes the call. Off to a river, which is the 6 of clubs. Mixed feelings about this one because we now improve to beat hands like ace 3. But of course, backdoor clubs come in, which aren't impossible to have. I will note that I've got the ace of clubs, and I immediately thought to myself, this would be a really cool hand to check raise if someone bets again. As a bluff, of course, because we'd probably be up against either straight or some sort of rivered flush. And if we check raise huge, we could represent full houses, which I might have from time to time, say hands like ace 6 or pocket aces, maybe even the nut flush that goes for a check raise on the river. But it turns out that all those thoughts are in vain because after I check, Peter checks, and then Dennis claims he's been counterfeited and also checks. So yeah, that brings a screeching halt to this hand, and we take it down. It ends up being a pretty normal hand, right? I mean, I raised pre-flop, we flop top pair, some action happened on the flop, some action happened on the turn, then it checked around on the river and we win, right? No big deal, except, look at this, I won $52,000 in this pot. This nothingness of a pot yielded me 50K, which is just nuts. And I know I keep going on and on about this, but it's crazy the amount of money that can go back and forth when you make the stakes this big. We're playing 200, 400, 800. I didn't realize when I showed up today how different that would be from 5,100. For whatever reason, I just assumed it was going to be another night at Hustler, but I was really noticing how ridiculous some of these numbers got in pots that didn't even seem that meaningful. Next, this hand goes down where I make it 2K. Brandon calls, a couple other players call, you know, standard issue. We flop trips on King, King 8 Rainbow. Would almost always advocate for betting strong hands, except we are 5 ways here. So I think checking almost all my holdings makes sense. Maybe bet some random bluffs like Queen Jack suited with backdoor flushes, and maybe bet hands like pocket 8s. Probably check everything else. That's what I do here. Brandon now bets 5,000 after I do that. Everyone else folds. I, of course, I'm not going to fold. I call. Turn card is the deuce of diamonds. I check it again, and for whatever reason, now that Brandon bets 11,000, I was getting this vibe that he is not bluffing. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I just had this feeling that we are not being bluffed, which is immediately a bit concerning because, yeah, I've got a king, but we lose to some better kings, which he could easily have, like King Jack or King Queen. We also lose to King 8, King Deuce suited, pocket 8s. So we're just kind of hoping that he's got King 9 or that I'm dead wrong and he is bluffing or somehow value betting a worse hand. Anyway, I'm not going anywhere just yet. I make the call and we see the 4 of diamonds on the river. I check it again, kind of hoping he doesn't blast. Like, I don't want to see him bet $60,000 here. But in the end, he ends up betting kind of small, 17,000, which is less than half pot. good price to call. Don't expect to win 100% of the time, but I toss in the money. Luckily, we are chopping it up here versus the same hand. So I'm happy to see that I was right about my instinct telling me that he was not bluffing, but I'm also quite happy to see that he does not have a better hand than me. So yeah, we haven't lost a huge pot tonight. Only got around an hour or two left, hoping that that remains true for the remainder of the stream. Here we go. A little bit later, Max makes it 2,000. I look down at ace king. Sweet, another good hand. I make it 7,000 to go. Brandon cold calls this $7,000 raise on the button. Max also makes the call. So 3 of us go into a flop, which looks like bricks all around. It's 5-4 deuce rainbow. Unlikely anyone's going to connect with this too often, so really the only hands I'm concerned with are pocket pairs, of course. Max now leads out though, which is weird. He bets $2,000. It's essentially a check, since this is like less than 10% of the pot. I'm going to pretend it's a check. What would I do if Max had checked? Well, I would probably bet small or check it back. I think Brandon's cold call on the button behind me is enough to check more often, since he's often going to be cold calling with hands like pocket eights and such. So I decide to essentially check back, which in this case means call the $2,000, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't, but that's how I think about it. Anyway, I call 2K. Brandon calls 2K as well. He's got 2 overs and the backdoor hearts. Everything seems kind of standard so far, aside from maybe Max's flop lead, but we get immediate help on the turn. It's the ace of clubs, which I am more than happy to see, of course. Max, however, does not seem to care about this ace, and he leads out again, $5,000. It's a pretty small bet once more, though. It's only, what, 1/5 the size of the pot. So if we were deeper, I think I would just raise now and try to get more chips in the middle, but he's only got around 25 or 30k remaining, which is less than a pot-sized bet after this 5k. So I think I'm just gonna call and see what happens on the river. Brandon gets out of the way, so heads up just between me and Max going to this last card, which is the deuce of clubs. I don't really think that changes anything. A 3 is still a straight, but how often are we really going to be up against a straight? I mean, it is Max. He could have a wide variety of holdings. The man is not afraid to gamble. But also, I feel like he would have bet bigger on the turn if he had made a straight. So I'm not too worried about it. Max now bets again, though, $7,000. And I don't know. I mean, if we're beat, we're beat. I don't want to just call and leave him with some money behind if he's got a smaller ace or maybe a non-believing pair of 5s, like say 6-5 or whatever. Gonna try to get the max here, and if we value own ourselves, I'm okay with it. He's got 20k behind. I rip it all in there, and it doesn't take him too long to fold. As you guys can see, he was trying to steal this one away with king high. Not gonna work this time, Max. Unfortunately, I turned a pair, and a really good pair at that. So we win this pot. Don't get the absolute max, well, no pun intended, but we do get a fair amount here, 31k heading our direction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last interesting hand from tonight's stream. In this one, I've got 7-5 offsuit, which is a little bit different than the cards I've been playing tonight. Reason being is I am one of the last, I think 2 or 3 players left who needs to win one of these buttons. I've already lost a stand-up game once tonight, which I didn't show earlier because I don't really know how to show me folding a bunch of hands that aren't really playable. But I did lose it once, so that was 9k down the hole. And I'm trying to avoid that happening again, so I make it $3,000 with 7-5 offsuit. Probably not even worthwhile, considering that you have to bet a lot of money to try to win a pot in this table, which kind of makes you feel like maybe just losing 9k is the better option, the lesser of the two evils, if you will. And look at this, it's a perfect example of why that might be the case, because Peter calls on the button with Jack-7 off. Brittany calls with 9-5 in the big blind. I mean, she is suited. I guess it's not the worst thing ever, but yeah, it's just tough to get folds here. We do flop 2 pair, technically. It's 10-10-5 though, so I'm not hating it until this happens. Check this out. Brittany checks. I continue betting for 3,000. Peter folds. Now Brittany jams for 26,000. What the hell is going on here? I mean, if she had a 10, I highly doubt she would do this. Wouldn't she just want to feed me more rope? But then again, could she really be bluffing on a board this dry? I'm a bit worried about being up against like pocket 6s or 7s, maybe a better 5. I don't know. Perhaps she's just had enough of it and decides that I'm not going to hit this board very often, which she's not wrong about. But I did this time. I've got a 5, and it's ahead of any bluff, I think. So whatever, it's time to give some action here. Hopefully we've got the best hand. If we don't, then it's Brittany. Worse things could happen than giving her a double up. So I make the call, and I'm quite afraid to hear that she's got a 5 as well. I think that often means that we're going to be behind, and sure enough, we are outkicked here. She's got a 9. Turn card is a deuce of diamonds, which gives her a flush draw, but the river is a glorious ace, which means that we are now chopping this one as we both have 2 pair, 10s and 5s, with an ace kicker. Pretty sweet, and it wouldn't be a good night without a little bit of run good, as you guys can see here. Only thing is, we don't win this one, which means that we don't get a stand-up button. And shortly after this hand, I did end up losing the stand-up game once again. So another 9K that unfortunately was lost. But can't complain too much. It was an overall great night. And as always, I hope you all enjoyed the hands. Okay, so as you guys saw, that was a really big session for me. I ended up winning just over $200,000 in around 6 hours of play, which is a ridiculous result. It's the biggest win of the year for me so far. Not the biggest win of my life, but definitely one of the top 5, I believe. And it couldn't come at a better time because if you guys have been following recently, it's been tough. I've had a really rough stretch the last month or so. So this definitely puts us back in the right direction. I won $60,000 in the previous vlog. This one I won 200. So we are nearly out of the hole as it is for that downswing and on our way back to having a positive year. So this session was everything I could ask for and hopefully a sign of things to come in the next few months to close out the year. So that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the poker, and until next time, good luck at your local tables. Next time you hear from me, it'll be from Texas, Austin specifically, where I'll be playing some more poker. So stay tuned for that video. See you guys next time. Peace.